Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. And I gotta tell you, the gentleman on my show today has so much going on. He has a tour about to start. He's recording a new album. He released an album in October. He's got a great nonprofit. He had a collaboration with two legends. And me, this morning, I wiped the snow off my car, and I was exhausted. I don't know how he does it. My guest is Joe Bonamassa. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing great, man. How you doing?
I want to start off today about your nonprofit. I know you're keeping the blues alive. I grew up in an area where we had great music and theater in our school, and we were very aware, and I think that's disappeared. Tell me more about that nonprofit.
Well, we started it about 12, 13 years ago, and maybe more. And it basically is just, initially was designed to help raise money to fund music in schools. And then in those lost years of 2020 to 2021 and a half, we raised over almost $1 million for musicians in need because they couldn't pay their bills. And so we kind of changed the direction of it, and now we do a little bit of both. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of in my career is the philanthropy and giving back. And yeah, we have to promote it to raise money, but we don't do it for self-promotion. We do it to promote, to try to, raise the finances to start guitar programs and stuff like that. You would think it's a no-brainer, but it's not. So I'm very proud of the team that's worked on that, and very, very happy for the results, obviously.
Now, where does that come from? I mean, for when you were a kid, did you have a good schooling system and a good music system? I mean, people just don't start a foundation unless they've had a very good experience and they want to give back. I mean, is it something that you started because of experiences you had had?
Well, I grew up, I went to school in the 80s and the early 90s. And there was still music programs in schools. It was, even in our little small, town, there was music being taught both at a elementary and a high school level. And, a lot of times, and I would travel in the early 2000s, I would travel around to high schools and stuff like that, doing kind of blues in the school things for the Blues Foundation. And what I found was it wasn't by the year 2003, it wasn't a foregone conclusion that there was going to be a music program at all. The funding, it just got cut, and be like, well, we're taking it off the air. And it's something that I'm passionate about, and I think it's a good cause. I mean, I think it's a net positive for kids to have some sort of arts in their life, whether it be music or arts. That's everything from Broadway to painting and everything else. And if our foundation can help fund some of these programs that wouldn't normally end up on the cutting room floor, then yeah, I'm all in.
Now, you recently, you not only got to do a collaboration with Dave Mason, you got to get a collaboration with Peter Frampton. How did they come about? I mean, that's for me. That's like, that must be for you. That must be so awesome. I mean, one would be great, but you had two. And, how did those come about?
Well, Peter's been a friend for a long time. So is Dave Mason, and kind of just reached out to him and said, hey, Dave reached out to me and I reached out to Peter, and it kind of worked out differently. But it's cool, and we hit some really nice, songs, 4-Day Creep, one of my favorite Humble Pie songs, and Feeling All Right, and all this stuff. It's or Dear Mr. Fantasy, that's what we did. And that was challenging. But also, you're getting to play music with your heroes. I just think it was like a really fun experience. And we made, I think, good new versions of the songs.
Now, is there an intimidation factor that goes in? I mean, yeah, you're a great guitarist. Everyone knows you, but when you sit there and you get to sit down and you're friends with them, but you get to do this recording with someone, as you said, people that your heroes. What's in your mind when you sit there? Do you sit there and go, "Man, I don't want to screw this up," even though you know you have the chops? I mean, what goes through your mind when you meet that hero and you're playing with them?
Well, it's a lot more. There's a lot more pressure when you're on stage because you don't get a second take. In the studio, you can do as many takes as you want. Obviously, you want to nail it, but if you don't nail it, then you can do it again. It is intimidating, but it's also some of the nicest people I've met in this world are the most talented. And you could say that about Peter Frampton and Dave Miggs.
Now, Blues Deluxe 2 came out in October. It was #1. How do you choose? Because there's originals and covers. How do you choose what you are going to put on an album like that? Is it something that do you think what your fans will want to hear, or how do you choose the mix? Because it's very eclectic.
Well, it was based on the ratio of the first album, the first Blues Deluxe. So it was a mixture of covers and originals, and I just wanted to make a good blues record. I also wanted to ask myself, am I good at 45 as I was at 25? And I couldn't sing those songs at 25. I could sing them at 45, and it's it's because I learned how to sing, and it's also because I worked on my voice and I learned how to sing, and I learned how to be that a more sophisticated. I mean, Blues Deluxe Volume 1 is nothing but just bash out 3-piece, shout and key kind of stuff. And people like that. It's one of my most popular records. The Blues Deluxe is a little more sophisticated. It's got horns, it's got BVs, songs are more melodic. And that's stuff that I don't think I could have tackled when I was 25.
Now, how have you grown as a musician? How do you have stages where you've seen, like you said, 20 years ago you couldn't have sang that because you've learned to sing, but was there just natural incremental stages that you noticed things are changing a little bit?
Well, yeah. I mean, your voice gets different. Your phrasing gets better. It's when you're on your second set of 10,000 hours, you spend your childhood and all of your 20s into your early 30s working on the 10,000 hour concept, and then when you turn 35, you're like, oh, the meter ran over, and now we're back at zero, and then we're on my second set of 10,000 hours. So it's I mean, and I'm well on my way to 20,000. And that's the thing. It's if you have experienced on stage and off in the studio, knowing what you want, knowing what you can pull off, knowing what you can't pull off. Those are the things that you don't have when you're in your 20s. In your 20s, you're just throwing anything against the wall, trying to make it cohesive. But you really start getting good when you're 35 to 40, and seasoned, and that's all the greats went through that, and in my personal experience, I'm not in a hurry anymore to do things, musically. It's a little bit. I'm a little bit more patient with what I do.
Now, how has your writing process changed? Because, I used to be a professional stand-up comic, and I occasionally do shows, and I have one coming up next week. And for me, my writing process is completely different. I found out, as you said, we grow. I mean, when I was 26 doing comedy, I'm different than now 59. And I just learned that I have an instinct of what will work. Before I was it was experimenting. How's your writing style changed over the years?
Well, it's gotten more melodic than it used to be. And, just like comedy, it's knowing, this will work. I've been here before. This will work, and I know what my fans like, and I know what my fans don't like. And for me, it's just more of the experimental process. I'm I'm not going to turn around and be like, well, I'm just going to do folk music now. It's no, want to hear a guitar solo. They want to hear some heavy blues riff. Okay, I know what I know what they want, and I'm happy to give it to them. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not one of those artists where like, man, I don't want to be typecast. I'm like, typecast me all day long. you know, because typecast and style are the same thing, and I find it very interesting. That people run from their own legacy or their own sound, and it's like I'm not that person. Like I know what the audience wants, and I'm not looking to cross genres. I'm not looking to be anything other than who I am now, and that's it until this thing runs out of steam. And then who cares?
What attracted you to the blues? Because it's you're a guy from New York. You don't think of the blues, and you were young when you started playing the blues. I mean, was it just, did you hear the blues one day and it hit you in a certain spot, or what attracted you to the blues? Because you don't hear a lot of younger guys, hitting the blues as much as you would. You think you would?
Well, I mean, it's the same logic as like what put a violin in Joshua Bell's hand. You know what I mean? It's like why does Usher sing R&B pop? It's like something binary must be attracting these people other than the money to the music. Because it's not always about the money. It's like when you're coming up, as you know, as a comedian, you're not living high on the hog, and you're doing it for the love of it. And you always have to remember that's why we all started in our bedrooms. We all started writing jokes, playing guitar, a certain style, whatever. And it's that passion, it's that pilot light that keeps going. And if you lose sight of the reason why you do it, and if it becomes too much about lifestyle, and it becomes too much about just doing it for other reasons than just keeping the fire going, then maybe it's time to think about the farewell tour. And so for me, the blues has always been something that when I hear or play, the pilot light immediately ignites, and I'm like, yeah, that's my happy spot.
Now, who were some of your when you were younger, who were some of your influences that really shaped you? Like, who did you sit there and want to say emulate? Like, for me, I liked Woody Allen. I loved his stand-up, and I would hear, Carlin, the wordplay. So I emulate them. And I think when we're younger, we find traces of them in us, and then when we get older, we go, oh, you know what? I wasn't trying to steal his act. I just, I looked up to him. Who are some people that you looked up to when you were younger?
Well, it's like authors who start by plagiarizing the first paragraph of their favorite book, and then next thing you know, they're writing something totally original. Then they go back and change the first paragraph. I mean, my influences were Clapton, Jeff Beck Group, Rory Gallagher, B.B. King, Free, Albert King, Freddie King, and I loved like the blues that was coming out of the East Coast in the 80s, the Roomful of Blues, Ronnie Earl, Duke Robillard, those kind of cats. And, I got to meet a lot of them, coming up. Albert Collins, met him, played with him. So, I was a sponge, a musical sponge, and I still am, I was just soaking it all in, But back in my day, and I sound like an old man now, is the records were believable and they were obtainable. And I'll define that. The records were believable because I know when I put on, Ice Pickin' from Albert Collins, he played and sang every note on that record. It was a recording of a performance. And they were obtainable, meaning that you could hear, like, it was just, there's an organ and a bass and a few overdubs, maybe, some horns, okay? And they were obtainable because they're like, okay, I can close my eyes and picture a band playing this on stage. Records, as they progressed, and the technology has progressed, I don't find them as obtainable, and I don't find them as believable. And that's the one thing I try to make sure that no matter what we do, especially on Blues Voice Volume 2, no matter what we do, it's got to be believable. It's like, yeah, I can hear Joe playing that shit and you know, singing that live, you know, not, you know, a layer cake of overdubs or things that couldn't be done by humanoids. And I think that's why people always look back on records now with you know, joyful, you know, it's a joyful reminiscing, is because it's like, man, there wasn't much to this. It's like an old car, you know, there wasn't much to this, but it's charming and human. And I think the deeper we get into the technology, especially now with AI, you're really going to run the risk of going, I don't even know if a human being was involved in this recording, other than just going, you know, Siri, you know, write me a blues song. You know what I mean? It's like, and then I mean, that's where it's heading.
Oh yeah, I see people put posts sometimes like on business things, and they, you know, it's AI. I'm like, well, how are you trying to convey your message that you're some kind of business coach or whatever when you didn't even write what you're trying to convey?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I'm old enough to remember, you know, the business life coach Charles Carras. And Charles Carras always had a budget to spend on marketing, because he would take the center section of every airline magazine, from U.S. Air to Delta to United. So like you're flipping through the you know, interest stories, go Niagara Falls, not just the falls. You know, it's like, you know, like, and then, you know, they do 1,200 words a puff piece about, like, you know, while you're in Buffalo, visit the Anchor Bar where the Buffalo Wild Wing was, you know. And then the middle section of it was, you know, like, you always get what you negotiate, Charles Carras. And, you know, it was written in words that people could understand, not like word salad. And I you know, I think it's important to have a good, you know, diverse vocabulary. But some of the stuff that AI is coming up with, it's like you've said a lot of words but didn't say anything. You know, and people are starting to speak like that, and it's like, I'm like, and you just want to go to them, you know, like, are you snorting Adderall? I mean, like, stop. Just layman's terms, man.
Right.
You know, like, we all know you have an accredited degree from an Ivy League university. You don't have to wear that on your wrist like a Rolex. You know?
Now I would ask you this. You know, you just recorded. You're in the studio. You're going to go on tour. Do you still take time? Because I know you have to. Do you still take time to sit down and practice? Like, I mean, I know because you keep your muscles strong by being in the studio or touring. But do you ever sit down and just pick up your guitar and practice, or is that something that it's something that you as you said, logged so many hours that you're actually getting firsthand? Yeah,
you know, very rarely do I just sit at home and just jam mindlessly without a goal or a reason to. You know, it's like, you know, like this week we're rehearsing for the tour, so I'm gonna sit here and hook up an amplifier and sing some songs and dust off the cobwebs, and yeah. But as far as practicing, I practice at rehearsal and I practice on the gigs or sound check, you know, because by the time I get through the first two shows, then I'm gig ready. Then I can really play, you know. It takes a minute, and you could rehearse for 2 weeks and it yields the same results as rehearsing for 3 days. And one show is like 10 rehearsals all at once. It's once you do it in anger, once you're up there, you know, it's like, you know, again, you could do your routine in front of a mirror, but once you get people in front of you, it's a whole different equation, you know, and you're seeing things in slow motion in real time as well, you know. It's like when, you know, I know when I break a string, you know, and I have to switch guitars mid-song, it seems like it's 10 minutes. But if you ever watched a video of a broken string, you know, at one of my gigs or somebody else's, and the swap, it's like it's 2 blinks of an eye and you're back up and running. But to the performer, it seems like 20 minutes or 10 minutes, and it's like the longest pause. And it's just, yeah.
I mean,
but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, because you always dwell on it. Like me, if I was doing a bit and it didn't get a laugh, I would dwell on that little bit that didn't get a laugh, and I'm like, but I had a good set. But you get that dwell, like, and you're right, it is like slow motion. When you're not getting a laugh, you're like, holy crap, like this is like 3 minutes. I mean, I'm just they hate me.
Yeah, and part of the experience on stage is fighting your way out of those situations. You don't learn much on a performance of any kind by when everything goes right and you get 10 standing ovations and they're throwing roses at you and the mayor pops up out of his front row seat, stops the show and gives you a key to the city. When those gigs happen, you just come off stage going, of course, and you start patting yourself on the back and everybody's arms get longer and you learn nothing from those gigs because of course it's the way it's supposed to go down because that's the way we designed it. Well, it's the gigs that go wrong and the gigs that, like, the songs that lay flat, the jokes that don't work, problems. That's when you really earn your money. That's when it's like, okay, calmness and just confidence in what you're doing. Like we will skate out of this. It may not be our best moment, but it will not be our worst. And understanding the difference between your worst and your best is maybe 10%. That's also part of the factor. There's nothing that my worst gig and my best gig is about 6 to 7 clicks. It's just like, oh, he was on tonight. Oh, he was off tonight. But then you listen back to it, it's about the same. Like maybe I lacked a little energy or I flubbed a couple of notes, but nothing tragic's going to happen. Like nothing, like, oh my God, I forgot how to sing or I forgot how to play, none of that's going to happen. So you have a reasonable expectation of an outcome, and that's experience.
Now, in your career though, and thinking back in your career, is there like one hell gig that any age that stands out to you that you look back and go, oh my God, that was a nightmare? Because I think everyone has had that one gig. It's usually when you're younger, but is there anything that sticks out to you?
Well, yeah. I mean, Memphis in the year 2000. We had just finished opening up for Jethro Tull as my first solo tour on Epic Records. And so, okay, fine. The training wheels come off, and you're on your own, kid. We show up to Memphis on a rainy Tuesday night at the end of August, and I'm playing $8 for the door. And I received on that evening what they call the golden goose, when you're playing for the door and nobody shows up and you gross $0. So that's when you go, maybe I should look at those DeVry brochures that my parents keep putting in the Christmas gifts, But that takes a fortitude and a tenacity. You cannot let there's in anybody's life, in anybody's career, of anything that you do, there are setbacks. There's this notion of like, this notion that some people in the younger generation, like younger generations who I met plenty of brilliantly, wonderfully talented young people, but there is a certain quotient of them that don't want to hear the hard truths about their talent or about their act or maybe what they can improve. And those people that come up to you, okay, and maybe after a gig in Memphis when nobody shows up and says, hey, listen, there's a reason why there's nobody here tonight. So give them a reason to have somebody here, and you're not entitled to any of it. It's for you. The world is yours to go out and take what you want and be nice about it. But also you have to have the tenacity and the fortitude to shrug it all off, listen to your trusted people that have your best interest in mind, but also listen to your heart and be like, nope, I'm going to do this and I'm going to fight my way up the ladder. And sometimes you start on the ground. You don't start halfway up the ladder. You start on the ground level.
Well, talking about gigs, you played the Hollywood Bowl. And what was like? I lived in LA for 15 years, and when you would go to see a show at the Hollywood Bowl, there's just a feel. There's just that feel. What was that like for you? Because you played with an orchestra. I mean, was that something that first of all, how do you acclimate? Was that your first time playing with an orchestra, or how do you acclimate?
Yeah, it was the first time. Yeah, first time at the bowl, first time at the orchestra.
So what was that experience like? Because I can imagine you going with the orchestra, and I'm walking backstage. It must have been like, holy shit, this is a Hollywood Bowl.
Well, I could tell you this: when you take musicians whose school of approach are diametrically opposed to each other and shove them all on stage, it's a stressful evening. Orchestras don't improv. David Campbell doesn't improv. All I do is improv. And so if they wrote the score to a live track, and on that particular evening, because they wrote the scores to pre-existing live arrangements, which just came from board tapes or whatever, and I approved them. But I never realized that, like, on certain evenings, I'll take a 20-bar solo. I don't know why it should be 24, but I just throw my arm up and we're moving on. You know, the 7-piece can pivot real easy. The 12-piece even pivots real easy. Okay, we're moving on. Old school, B.B. King style. The orchestra doesn't move on. The orchestra they're as magnificent as they are fearless musically, in the sense that they will run off a cliff because that's what says, because it says, if it says run off the cliff on the chart, train wreck ahead, they're going to go. And they're going to run right off the cliff. So it was stressful having to have a keen mind's eye on where everything lined up and how we pulled it off. But everybody was exhausted by the end of that run because it was so intense concentration-wise while you're on stage. And, you know, it was very, very difficult, very challenging. I'm so glad I did it, so honored. And David Campbell did a wonderful job. He just did a wonderful job. And a lot of people did a wonderful job. You know, Kevin Shirley and Trevor Rabin and Jeff Bova. You know, to marry the two worlds is difficult, to say the least.
Whose idea was it? I mean, was it something that you had wanted to do, or you got approached? Or?
I wanted to do it. Yeah, originally we were supposed to do it at Red Rocks in 2020, and we were going to have the scores written and do it with the Colorado Symphony, and that obviously didn't happen. And then we had this project on the back burner for 3.5 years, and then had this opportunity to do the Hollywood Bowl. I'm like, let's do the Hollywood Bowl. LA Phil, baby.
Pandemic. Because, you know, you're a guy who loves the live stage. How did that affect you? Did you write? Were you more creative, or did you miss that energy?
I wrote a record for Eric Gales. Helped him write the record, and produced that in August of 2020, and it got nominated for a Grammy. But as far as my own stuff, I didn't do it. And I was like, not in the mood, you know. I mean, I get why people do what they do, and I get it. We live in a TikTok world, but I wasn't interested in, you know, like, you know, because a lot of the trend was like interesting covers done by your favorite artists in their pajamas in their basement. I wasn't going to do that. It's not doing it.
Now, you're excited for the tour coming up. It starts next week. It starts the 19th. Monday. So when you go on, when do you create your set list? When is that all? You know, do you do that before? Do that night of, or?
I have a grid. I have a apex curves. You know what I mean? And you just fill in the blanks. You need peaks and valleys. You need the moment of truth, and you need the hits, and that's it. So I have the grid mapped out, and I don't like leaving things to chance. I'm not one of those guys like, what do you feel like playing? I'm not doing it in front of 3,000. No, it's not doing it. That's disrespectful. You know what I mean? It's like you come see a slick, well-produced show, you know, and there's improv within the songs. Certain things go long, certain things go short. That's fun. That's the fun for the audience and for us. But as far as me going, well, I don't feel like, oh, there's some people say, I don't write set lists. Well, okay, you're just going to go up there and play? I need to tell the light guy something.
Right.
You know?
Now, do you have...
You got to give the front house guy a heads up on who's solo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's not as... That's an approach. That's just not my approach.
Now, when you go into a solo, is it different every night, or you just feel it, or do you feel the audience? How do you, if you have it set?
In theory, you'd want it to be different every night, but as the tour grinds on, you start seeing some deer trails show up. Like, okay, I was here, and then you get some cues on the bailout, and you see some deer trails. The most unique solos I play on all of the songs are at rehearsal because I forgot what I did. I forgot where I left off, and then eventually 3 days in, it's like, oh, okay, this is where we were.
I have one more question, and because I know you're short on time, you have to tell me a little about your guitar collection. I was telling my buddy, he's a guitarist in LA. He said you're on, and he goes, "Oh my God!" His first thing was, "He has the best guitar collection in amp." When did you start doing this? And tell me, how many pieces do you have, and do you have a favorite?
I have over 1,100 pieces. That's guitars and amps. Long and short of it is I started collecting as soon as I made some money. Doing my first gigs when I was 11 years old. And it was a lot cheaper back then than it is now. But, I've always had the collecting bug. I've always liked it, Did I ever think by the time I, turning 47 in May, I think by the time I'm 47, I'd be one of the biggest guitar collectors in the world? No. But that's addiction. And those are other issues that need to be addressed. And no, it's it's all going to go to somebody else one day. It's all going to go to somebody. And I'm just here to be a custodian of what I think is manufacturing and design that really represents how great this country can be. Like, I can pull a guitar off the wall. I'm here in Nashville. I can pull a guitar off the wall. Every screw, every nut, bolt, piece of wood, everything was built here and designed here. And it was like, and I collect guitars, solid body electrics from about 1950 to 1964 or 5. And that 15-year period changed the world. They made thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of guitars that all seem to be just as relevant now as they were 70 years ago, 74 years ago. You know what I mean? And I don't know of any industry or anything that kind of works like that. Like GM doesn't build a 59 Cadillac as their core business, but part of Gibson's core business is building a replica of the 59 Les Paul. And people are still chasing that. And there was just something cool that happened in those 15 years between Leo Fender and Ted McCarty and others that got in the game, Jim Marshall and Ken Jennings and all those guys. They built something very, very special that's still relevant today, that could be used today on stage to make new music, modern music, not just blues and old-timey rock. It's like Post Malone has vintage guitars, and he's making relevant pop music. And so that's why I collect them. Do I need anything? Absolutely not. But that doesn't stop me.
How many guitars do you tour with? When you go out on the road, how many guitars do you take?
We usually start with a dozen, and then the buying starts, and then I end up coming back with 20, 25. It just depends. I mean, stuff finds me. It's like people are like, well, how do you find all this stuff? I'm like, listen, man, you gotta hunt the first few down. But once you do that, you'd be surprised what comes to you.
Do you
I just want to see a lot of people with family heirlooms, because I don't do eBay, I don't do the So, I don't do whatever. I don't do online because that's like fishing in a trout pond. I'd rather be in the waders out in the stream, freezing my ass off, catching nothing. But when you do catch something, it's nobody's ever seen it before. That's my thing.
Do you still have your first guitar?
No, I have my first Strat, but I don't have my first guitar. I mean, we were lower middle class when I grew up, and we had to. If I wanted another one, I'd have to sell this one, trade it in, boom, boom.
This has been awesome, man. I'm glad I'm doing the tour. You have this tour, then you're going to the cruise, then you're going to Europe, and then you're coming back to tour. Does it get tired to you at all? As you get older, does your body start feeling the wear?
Not really. We're not at the Super 8s anymore, so we roll pretty heavy. It's fun. It's a new adventure every day. If I make a bad record, it's out there forever. If I make a bad show, I have a chance to redeem myself the next night. That's what I love about touring, is it starts at zero. Your greatest night, your worst night. Next day you wake up, you shake it off and move on.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on, Joe. People go to his website, jbonamassa.com. You get all the info. You can buy his album there. You can see all his tour dates. Go see him. Go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 995 episodes on there. Email me at cooper@coopertalk.net. Twitter, I'm at coopertalk. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget to drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time.